Ever wonder where our oldest stories really come from? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty radical theory that connects one of the most famous myths of all time, the Great Flood, to a real-world cataclysm. One that might have pushed our ancestors to invent something that changed everything, the very first ships. And this story, it doesn't start with wood and sails, it starts with ice.
We all know the story, right? A world-ending flood, a giant boat built to save whoever's left, and a safe landing on some high mountain. Now, most of us think of Noah's Ark and Mount Ararat, but the thing is, this story is everywhere. It shows up in cultures all over the globe, from the ancient Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh all the way to old Kazakh legends.
And that's the big question. What if this isn't just a story? What if it's a memory? A piece of history passed down for thousands of years, a memory of a time when the world literally changed almost overnight. Okay, so to unravel this, we have to go back in time, and I mean way back, about 20,000 years ago to the end of the last ice age. Geologists call it the last glacial maximum. Basically, think of it as peak ice age, the absolute coldest the world had been. Just look at this. This gives you an idea of how wildly different the planet was. You see these massive ice sheets, we're talking kilometers thick, just sitting on top of North America, Europe, Asia. It made the whole world colder, drier, a lot dustier, and with way less green than we have today. So all that ice, where did the water for it come from? Simple, the oceans. And this number right here is so important. Global sea levels were a staggering 120 meters lower than they are today. All that water was just locked up, frozen solid in those glaciers.
And you can see what that meant for people. With the north totally frozen and the south becoming a desert, humanity was literally squeezed into this narrow little temperate zone, this habitable belt. And one of the most important safe havens, a key refuge, was this area right here, the basin around the Caspian and Aral Seas.
For thousands of years, this was the world. This was normal. But then, the planet started to warm up. The ice started to melt. And that set the stage for one of the most violent and world-changing events in all of human history. As things got warmer, those huge ice sheets, they didn't just melt away peacefully. No way. The meltwater started pooling behind them, forming these absolutely enormous, incredibly unstable lakes held back by nothing but dams of cracking ice. We're talking about lakes bigger than anything that exists on Earth today.
And then, around 15,000 years ago, those ice dams broke. An unimaginable amount of fresh water came roaring south, pouring into that low-lying Caspian-Aral basin. It basically took the two separate smaller seas and slammed them together into one single giant freshwater ocean.
I mean, the scale of this is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. Before this flood, the water level there was 150 meters below modern sea level. Afterwards, it shot up to 50 meters above. That's a 200-meter rise. The coastline would have been racing inland, maybe kilometers every single year.
You know, the great 14th century thinker Ibn Khaldun once said, "Geography is your destiny." Well, for the people living in that basin 15,000 years ago, their destiny was being completely rewritten by a geography that was vanishing before their very eyes.
But here's the thing. All of that destruction, it also created something totally new. Out of all that watery chaos, a radical innovation was born. And it would, no exaggeration, change the course of human history. Just try to imagine living through that. Your hunting grounds, your home, everything you know is just getting swallowed by water. That kind of pressure, well, it forces you to adapt or die. You have to figure out a way to live in this new world.
And you can pretty much map out the logical steps they must have taken. First, you swim. Then you figure, hey, let's tie some logs together. Now you have a raft. But rafts are clumsy, they're unstable. So over time, you learn to shape the wood to build a real boat, something that can actually carry you and your stuff safely across this new sea.
And this brings us to the absolute heart of the theory, shipping. As a technology, wasn't born on the big, scary, salty oceans. It was born right here, on the much calmer waters of this enormous inland sea, out of pure necessity, thanks to the Great Eurasian Flood.
It's a really powerful idea, right? But is there any proof? Well, yeah, there is. The proof is in the echoes this event left behind. Echoes in stone, in geography, and even in the words people still use today.
And this is the smoking gun, carved right into the rock. On the shores of the Caspian Sea in Azerbaijan, you find these things called the Gobestan rock carvings. They're dated as far back as 14,000 years ago. That's right after the megaflood. And they don't show little canoes. They show big, sophisticated boats with tons of rowers. This is hard evidence of an advanced maritime culture in the exact right place at the exact right time.
And the geography lines up perfectly too. You know how old texts like the Book of Genesis talk about a paradise fed by 4 great rivers? Well, look at this map of the flooded basin. The 4 main rivers that flowed into it, the Volga, the Aras, and 2 others, it's a perfect match. Could this fertile Ice Age refuge have been the original Garden of Eden story?
Then you get these linguistic clues that are just, wow. Right next to Mount Ararat, the legendary spot where the Ark landed, there's a very ancient city called Nakhchivan. In the local language, its name literally means the first to come out. I mean, come on. Maybe a coincidence, but what a coincidence.
And it's not a one-off. In old Kazakh flood stories, they say the Great Ark was built at a specific spot, east of the Aral Sea. The place is called Kemisalgan. And the meaning of that name? Shipbuilding place. The memory is literally fossilized in the language of the region.
So when you put all the pieces together, the picture is pretty clear. You have a real, documented mega flood that completely transforms the Caspian-Ural Basin. This forces the people living there to invent boats to survive. And the memory of that terrifying, world-changing event gets passed down from generation to generation, eventually morphing into the story we all know as the Great Flood.
And that leaves us with a final, kind of mind-blowing thought. If the story of the Great Flood is actually a cultural memory of a real climate change event, it just makes you wonder, how many of our other ancient myths and legends aren't just fantasy, but are echoes of our ancestors trying to survive on a planet that was changing right under their feet?